Here are 3 true scary stories from Reddit. The links to the stories are in the description below. Enjoy. Number 1. Okay, so I'm currently a 20-year-old female college student. I'm at the end of my 3rd semester, and that of course means I have a shit ton of assignments to do for all of my classes. Fun. I'm also a major procrastinator, which makes it even more fun. This also means that I spend a majority of my weekends camped out at the library near my house, working on homework for hours. I've been doing this since last semester. I get easily distracted when I'm at my house, which is why I go to the library so much. It has more of a sit your ass down and do your work environment. Anyway, onto the story. Like I said before, I've been spending hours at the library since last semester. This is where the first encounter took place, either at the end of April or early May of this year. I was extremely stressed out since I had so many assignments to do and wasn't in the mood to talk or deal with anyone. I just wanted to get my work done. After a few minutes of being at the library, I noticed him. There was a guy around my age walking up and down the book aisles that were right next to where I was seated. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see him watching me. I shrugged it off and went back to work. About 10 minutes later, he approached me. He stood right next to my table and just stared at me. I took out one of my headphones and glared up at him. "Can I help you?" I asked in a rather pissed off tone. He started stuttering and mumbling something. I think it was along the lines of how my day was going. I told him I was busy and he walked off. Okay, weird, but at least he left. Well, I thought he left. He ended up coming back about 15 minutes later and proceeded to do the same thing. He just stood by my table and stared at me. I was tired of this and really wanted this guy to leave me alone so I could get my work done. I took out my headphones once again and asked him what he wanted. "What's your name?" he asked. "I'm not going to tell you my name." This is when he got angry. "Why not?" he asked, his voice growing louder. I glared at him and responded with, "Because I don't know you!" At this point, the guy at the table next to me had noticed something was up. He didn't say anything, but began glaring at him too. I don't know if this is what made the guy back off or not, but after that he instantly calmed down. He mumbled an apology and walked off. At the time, I was constantly having anxiety and panic attacks due to all the stress I was under. I ended up going home and had an anxiety attack after this incident. I also told my friend about this encounter. He said that the guy was probably just trying to flirt with me and really sucked at it. I agreed with him, but still made sure to be on the lookout for this guy every time I went to the library. I didn't see him and eventually ended up forgetting about the incident. Well, at least until today. Flash forward 7 months later to today. I'm near the end of my 3rd semester and had a huge research paper due in a couple of days. That, of course, I had procrastinated on. I went to the library, sat down at a table, and began doing my work. About 20 minutes in, I noticed a guy walk up to my table and stare at me. I looked up and the guy proceeded to mumble that he liked my hat and then walked off. That's when I remembered that it was the same guy as before. Fuck. I made sure he wasn't anywhere near me before going back to work. I know, I should have moved spots or something, but the library was packed and there weren't any more open tables for me to sit at. What made this situation a little worse is that the guy ended up sitting at the table right across from mine. However, it seemed like he was captivated in his own work, so I, once again, brushed off his weird, awkward flirting and went back to doing my own thing. About an hour later, he came up to my table again. "What's your name?" he asked. I said the exact same thing that I had said the last time I saw him. That I wasn't going to tell him my name and that I was busy. He mumbled an apology and then asked me where I got my hat. I said that I didn't remember and he walked off. I would have ignored all of this and just chalked it up to him being really awkward and bad at flirting. But right before he left the library, I began hearing the clicking of a camera. Out of the corner of my eye, I looked towards him, and from what I saw, it looked like his phone was pointed directly at me. I instantly got creeped out and my voice got stuck in my throat. I know I should have said something, but I froze. The guy then grabbed his stuff and left. Even after he was gone, I couldn't focus on my work anymore and ended up going home. I can't say for certain that this guy was taking pictures of me, but from what I saw, he was. Thankfully, school ends soon, so I won't be going to the library as much anymore until the next semester starts. I'll also start carrying pepper spray and being more aware of my surroundings. Hopefully, I won't have to run into this guy again. Number 2. So, I used to work in a public library. I absolutely love my job and all the interesting people who came through. As with any job in the public, you do occasionally come in contact with some creeps. One night, I was working with one other coworker until close when this older gentleman came in. He was probably pushing 60, was skinny, and had gray stringy hair. He had come from one of our other locations to use a computer. We were open later than the other branches. I set him up on an available computer, and within minutes he was at the desk asking to exchange the headphones he purchased earlier in the day. I obliged without thinking anything of it. As I handed them to him, he grabbed my hand to introduce himself. He told me his name and told me how beautiful he thought I was, and that he'd love to take me out and show me a good time. I politely declined. Mind you, I was 25 at the time. He gave me this long, scornful stare, then stormed back to his computer until closing time. Upon leaving at close, he mumbled some very choice words under his breath. I came to work the next day, but I was in the back, setting up for a presentation in the conference room. One of my good friends who I worked with came running into the room and told me some old dude was walking around the library mumbling about the girl with dark hair. She came to warn me. Luckily, my shift was over and I was heading out for the night. She called me later in the evening to inform me that some dude, turned out to be Creepface, called and asked if and when I was working again. At this point, I was becoming legitimately concerned and contacted my supervisor about how to handle this. She told me to contact security and do what I felt was best. The next day at work, I was on edge constantly. I had my husband's number on standby, and I had a good friend of mine come hang around the library for the last leg of my shift. And lo and behold, the one time I was alone, I see Creepface making a beeline for me. I ran to the back office to hide. He followed me the whole way, then waited outside the door for me to come out for almost an hour. I started hyperventilating when I heard someone trying to open the door. To my relief, it was the maintenance guy who came in the back to check on me. I let him in the room and told him the scenario. He stormed out and told the dude off and to never come back. I had a friend and a family member follow me home for the next couple of weeks to be safe. Plus, I always took a different route on my way home. This was one of the more terrifying experiences of my life. So creepy old dude, let's not meet again. Number 3. I'm a 26-year-old female and I work the front desk at a public library. Let me tell you about Hank. He's mid-30s, average-looking guy, and he's always with his mother. He has some sort of mental disability that no one is really sure of, which gives him a speech impediment. Most of all, he loves to read. Once or twice a week, Hank and his mother come in with bags overflowing with books to return, only to come back to the desk with an equally tall pile of checkouts. He'll talk about his favorites out of the return bag and rattle off lists of titles for us to reserve for him. When he's not physically in the library, he'll call us with requests or just to ask if his previous orders are ready. And speaking of those orders, his lists are so long that something arrives for him almost every day. Rarely a day goes by where Hank isn't mentioned in some way. All the librarians know Hank, and he knows all of us by name. He's usually polite and upbeat, and likes to share what he's reading with us. This would all be fine if Hank's favorite genre didn't happen to be romance. And I don't mean Nicholas Sparks. I'm talking about the endless abyss of Harlequin sleaze, pulpy paperbacks with nearly broken spines, and covers bearing cheeky titles with glistening, faceless torsos locked in passionate embrace. Obviously, those books are popular to begin with, hence the ruined spines, and we librarians see all kinds of snicker-worthy titles get checked out. We're all adults and we've all read our fair share of smut. It's not as if we're a bunch of prudes passing judgment, but whereas most patrons have some sense of modesty about their sexier checkouts, Hank doesn't hold back. He has absolutely no shame about his romance habit, because as far as I can tell, to him they're just books. No different than any other book in the library. He'll spout off the most ridiculous sounding titles and gush about authors with the same unchecked enthusiasm teenagers have when they tell me about a young adult series. So far, this is all quite harmless, if not a little unusual. My problem with Hank is that I'm his favorite. I could tell from the moment I met him that he liked me, given how friendly and personal he was. It only got uncomfortable when one day he invited me to his house. Of course, I politely declined. He went on to explain that he and his mom had really fixed the place up, and we could have dinner and play Xbox together. I said no and mentioned I had a boyfriend, to which Hank became visibly frustrated and said it was nothing like that. He just wanted to hang out with me. I declined again, and he finally gave up and left. Freaked out but slightly amused, I hurried to the break room to tell my friends. They all laughed and told me Hank was known to become very interested in new staff, and this wasn't the first time someone had been invited to his house. So I brushed it off and didn't take it too personally. As I said earlier, if Hank's not here, he'll call in, and somehow I'm usually the one to answer. He often keeps me on the phone for 10 or more minutes while he asks about his books and places requests. While I've come to expect it, it doesn't make the process any easier or less annoyingly time-consuming. During a particular call, after he's already had me on the phone for a while, he asked me to read the description of a particular book. I'm caught off guard since that's not really a common question, but I look up the title on Amazon. The book jacket blurb is so overloaded with flowery language that you could practically hear the bodices ripping, and I quickly decided there was no way I was reading this out loud to a man over the phone. I told him there was no description listed in the library catalog, and with that, he abruptly ended the call. Like I said, even when I'm talking with Hank on the phone, I still see Hank all the time. He makes it a point to come to my desk, even when I'm with other patrons. He'll wait, even if my coworkers are available to help him. When he's got me, he's very reluctant to let go. He spends as much time as he can at my desk, fiddling with his bag, asking redundant questions, all the while clearly racking his brain for what to say next. He always tells me how nice I look. Meanwhile, his mother stands next to him, avoiding contact with me, and is silent for the most part. When she does speak, it's only to say, "Hank!" with an insistent tone, whenever he dilly-dallies for too long at the desk. There are times that she has practically dragged him away. Her sheer embarrassment, bordering on contempt, used to bother me out of sympathy for Hank. These days, I wonder if she knows something we don't. The latest incident was the tipping point. Hank and his mother came in, unloading their returns into the bin. Hank begins babbling about what he wants renewed. His mother quickly disappears to do her browsing, and I set to filling Hank's request. Then he asks if I could tell him what he currently has on hold. I'm already inwardly groaning when I see the list has over 30 entries on it. I start reading the titles aloud, which start off with sci-fi fantasy. Then suddenly I'm careening down a list of 20 books that all include the term Bad Boys. It was a series, and each title was more puntastic than the last. I try to be professional, but I'm sure my disgust was obvious as I kept reading out the titles. I felt like everyone was listening to this and enjoying my discomfort, especially Hank. When I finally reached the end of the list and looked up at him, he was beaming, his eyes wide with excitement, and suddenly I felt sick. He leaned in and said, "What was that last one?" My helpful librarian mask was completely gone by that point. I set my jaw, shut my eyes, and said slowly and without a hint of sweetness, "I like bad boys." Hank flashed me another huge smile, said a quick thank you, and ran off, giggling with glee. After that, I took my break and hid in the back until I was sure he and his mother had left. That last bit happened about 2 weeks ago. Ever since, I have tried my best to avoid Hank. When I see him coming, I make myself disappear. There's not much I can do about the phone calls, since that's left up to chance. But when I have spoken to him, I am efficient, yet unfriendly. I hate to be that way, but it seems to be working, since he doesn't seem to hunt me down the way he used to. I'd like to think he's made the connection between his behavior and my sudden coldness, but I doubt it. And even if he has, it hasn't stopped him from engaging in similar conversations with the other young girls at the library. Maybe I'm an insensitive asshole prude, but I simply don't believe he's as naive as he appears. And it's a little unnerving to humor a grown man the way you would a teenage boy. Either way, I can only hope he'll eventually run out of printed smut and make the leap to digital. Then, whatever happens is between him and Amazon. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed. Until next time.